2 years ago, a man was killed in a moped accident. His name, Karon Hylton-Brown.
Now the jury has found Officer Terence Sutton guilty of murder, conspiracy, and obstruction.
Officer Terence Sutton have been reinstated. They were pardoned by President Trump just 2 days after the inauguration.
It lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes of a police car racing through the streets of Northwest Washington. The wrong way down one-way roads through stop signs, headlights off, chasing a 20-year-old man on an electric moped. When it was over, Karon Hylton-Brown lay in the street, unconscious, bleeding from severe head trauma. He would be dead within 48 hours. He was a father. His daughter was an infant. The officer who initiated that chase was Terence Sutton Jr., a 13-year veteran of the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, a man his colleagues called honorable, a man his union called a hero. A jury called him a murderer. And on January 22nd, 2025, 2 days into his second term, President Donald Trump called him a free man. History on the force. Terence Sutton Jr. was, by most accounts, exactly the kind of officer police departments hold up as an example. He joined the Metropolitan Police Department in the early 2000s and spent the next 13 years working his way through some of the city's most challenging assignments. By 2020, he was assigned to the 4th District's Crime Suppression Unit, a plainclothes team tasked specifically with reducing violent crime in high-crime areas of Northwest D.C. His colleagues described him as dedicated. His union backed him without reservation. Officers who worked alongside him showed up in court to testify that he was a good man who had been placed in an impossible situation and prosecuted for doing his job. He was a street officer operating in a neighborhood plagued by gang violence. On the night in question, he received information suggesting that a known gang associate was potentially on his way to commit a retaliatory act of violence. He spotted the man riding a moped, attempted to initiate a stop, and the man fled. Sutton followed. The man, not Sutton, drove into oncoming traffic. Sutton never touched him. That is the version of events the White House would embrace. The charges.
Brown died 2 years ago yesterday from injuries sustained after being struck by a vehicle while D.C. police were pursuing him. Terence Sutton is facing a second-degree murder charge along with federal conspiracy and obstruction of justice charges for engaging in and trying to cover up an unauthorized pursuit of Hylton-Brown that led to his death.
Karon Hylton-Brown, 20 years old, was riding an electric moped. He was riding on the sidewalk without a helmet. 2 minor traffic violations. Sutton believed, based on intelligence his unit had developed, that Hylton-Brown may have been preparing to retaliate against a rival. Prosecutors responded that it was irrelevant. Hylton-Brown was on a moped. He was not brandishing a weapon. He had only committed a traffic infraction. When Sutton activated his lights to initiate a stop, Brown fled. Sutton pursued Brown for more than 10 city blocks. His lieutenant joined in a second police vehicle. The pursuit violated the department's own written policy that explicitly prohibited officers from chasing suspects for minor traffic offenses.
Prosecutors allege Sutton immediately knew he had violated MPD general orders and the law, and that he and Lieutenant Andrew Zabavsky immediately began conspiring to cover it up. The assistant U.S. attorney ran through a series of slides on vehicular pursuits. One detailed 6 rules of the D.C. police, including do not flush into a roadway.
As the chase entered a narrow alley, the footage captured something prosecutors called pivotal. Sutton turned off his cruiser's emergency lights and sirens and accelerated. The alley had only one exit onto a busy street. Prosecutors argued that Sutton effectively trapped Brown, forcing him to choose between stopping and plunging into traffic. Brown reached the end of the alley and was struck by an oncoming vehicle. The impact was catastrophic. Brown suffered severe head trauma. And then came the part the jury would find impossible to excuse. As Brown lay unconscious in the street, bleeding out, Sutton did not call for medical assistance. They did not preserve the crash scene.
The jury said Sutton drove a police vehicle with conscious disregard for an extreme risk of death.
He is the only D.C. police officer to ever be convicted of murder on duty.
The pardon. From the moment of their conviction, Sutton had powerful advocates working on their behalf. The police union never wavered in its support. It called the prosecution an injustice from the beginning, and that charging an officer with murder in a case where no physical contact occurred with the victim was a dangerous overreach. Trump had been signaling sympathy for the case before he was even back in office. He posted a link to an op-ed calling for the officer's pardon on his Truth Social platform. His rhetoric about the weaponization of the justice system, a theme central to his 2024 campaign, mapped neatly onto the law enforcement community's framing of the prosecution. The police union formally sought a pardon from the Trump White House. And on January 22, 2025, Trump signed full and unconditional pardon for Sutton. The Metropolitan Police Department thanked the president for supporting its officers, saying the prosecutions had been unprecedented. Sutton told CNN he was overwhelmed and grateful. Within weeks, both men were reinstated to the Metropolitan Police Department.
I got to tell you, it's probably the most unjust conviction that I have seen in my career as a police officer.
Why it was controversial.
Both officers were pardoned by President Trump at the start of his term, but now a new report raises questions about how D.C. police handled the investigation and what the department needs to do differently moving forward.
The controversy over Sutton's pardon splits in two directions, and both directions are worth taking seriously. On one side, the legal argument that the prosecution was an overcorrection driven by political climate rather than legal precedent. No other jurisdiction in the United States had ever charged a police officer with murder for conduct during a chase where no physical contact occurred between the officer's vehicle and the person who died. The D.C. Police Department's own no-chase policy had been revised by Mayor Bowser just 3 years after Brown's death, expanded to allow pursuits in more circumstances after carjacking spiked in the city. Critics of the prosecution asked a pointed question. If the policy that Sutton violated was itself later deemed too restrictive, was the murder charge proportionate? The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, which backed Sutton, argued publicly that his conviction was the product of a justice system responding to political pressure in the immediate aftermath of George Floyd's murder, that Sutton became a symbol when he should have been treated as a case. Those are not frivolous arguments. The legal scholars who made them are not fringe voices. But on the other side, a jury heard 8 weeks of evidence and convicted Sutton on all counts. Not on a close call, not on a technicality, on second-degree murder and 2 counts of obstruction. And the obstruction, for many legal observers, is where the defense's arguments collapse entirely. Whatever one believes about the chase itself, the cover-up afterward is not ambiguous. Officers turned off body cameras, coached each other before speaking to command, allowed a witness to leave the scene, and filed a false report while a 20-year-old man was dying in a hospital. Civil rights advocates and legal scholars who supported the prosecution argued that the pardon sent a message that police officers who kill and then lie about it will be protected, not by the legal system, but by the highest office in the land. The president who declared a national emergency over lawlessness was simultaneously erasing the convictions of officers found guilty of murder and obstruction of justice.
How can you not put value on my child's life? He sat there, he scolded them, he knew they were wrong. You're convicted of murder. If this was reversed, if this was a black man, he'd have been locked up.
Collateral Damage. Karon Hylton-Brown was 20 years old. He had grown up in circumstances his girlfriend described as difficult, navigating the pressures of being a young black man in a neighborhood with limited opportunities and real dangers. His girlfriend said that on the night he died, he was on his way to a friend's house to collect his car keys so he could drive home, saying in a television interview, over a moped and some car keys, he lost his whole life. He never regained consciousness. He died in a hospital 2 days after the chase. His daughter was an infant. She will grow up without her father. Sutton, a man a jury convicted of second-degree murder, is once again a Washington, D.C. police officer. He is not currently assigned to patrol duties, but he is back on the force. His conviction no longer exists. His record is clean. The attorney for the Brown estate called the pardon outrageous and ill-advised. The civil lawsuit originally seeking substantial damages from D.C. and the officers involved now faces a challenge. A presidential pardon does not resolve a civil case, but it removes the criminal conviction that would have served as a powerful anchor for the civil claim. Karon Brown was 20 years old. He was riding a moped through his neighborhood on a Friday night, looking for his car keys so he could get home. His daughter is growing up without him. The man a jury found responsible for his death has his badge back. There are people who believe Sutton should never have been charged. There are people who believe the pardon was justice for a good officer, trapped by politics. And there are people who believe a 20-year-old father is dead. The officer responsible covered it up, a jury heard the evidence and rendered a verdict, and that a presidential signature erased it because of political alignment. Both of those things cannot be justice at the same time. That's the story of Trump's second pardon of his second term. Subscribe to follow this series because there are more names on that list, and every one of them has a story that deserves to be told.